private clause. On the other hand, I would like a different example, wherein if I initialize a value on the top, let's say, I want that value to be used in the program, and used in the program in the parallel block. Now, how can that be possible? That for that you need this variable called as first private. Okay. Now for this, what I'm going to do, let me just no, sorry, let me just comment this part. Okay. Let's see, format comment lines. Yeah. Now for the first private part, I'm going to uncomment these lines. Format uncomment lines, because this is the region where I'm going to need it. So what I've done is that I've set the value of thread num to be 12 in the top, and then I'm activating this. With this code is exactly the same as the code on the top, with a small difference. I'm just having a thread value over here, setting out get num thread, printing out active thread, making some modification to the thread num variable, and then I'm printing the the active thread and the thread value over here, and I'm closing the end parallel. The only difference is, instead of the private clause, I'm using this first private clause. Okay. Now, as based on our experience with private clause, what happens is that if the value is 12 over here, okay, the thread value should have been 0 because of the private clause. Now with the first private, something might be different, or it might be the same. Let's look at it. Now if we clear this up and run this, check it out. If I look at the result, the thread value before first private clause is 12, because that's obvious. How do I put it? That's obvious, because if you look at it, that's what the value of thread num is. Okay. And if you go inside the parallel block, it says that the thread value is 0, which is different when compared to the private clause. Had it been private clause, the thread value would have been initialized to 0, but instead what happens is that the thread value is value is 12, meaning the first private does not initialize the variable. So that's what we have to do. Private clause, private variables are auto initialized before usage, whereas private variables here must be initialized before usage. Okay. Otherwise, because it was initialized, the copy of it is used over here, and then they get manipulated and adjusted based on the code you put over here. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is that let me deinitialize this. And let me run this code. When I deinitialize this code, what happens is that since it's not deinitialized, the variable in thread num has some kind of a garbage value inside. And that garbage value enters inside the parallel block. So this is not safe. So what happens is that when I use first private clause, the value that was the variable has to be initialized prior to the block with some meaningful value. Otherwise, garbage values will enter inside the parallel block and they get modified. And if the modification is such that there's not a problem, then it's fine. But if, let's say, the garbage value goes inside and they do some kind of arithmetic issue, instead of maintaining 0, then your calculation will be wrong. So that's the thing. So that's the thing. So if you look at first private clause again, each thread adds its own copy of variable to modify. Values are deleted after scope of clause. Yes, because after the scope of this thread, after the scope of the parallel block, the value is still the value that was outside. Regardless of what the threads change, the value is still the value that was outside. Okay, outside the parallel block. So that's fine. That's how first private works. So which indicates that values are deleted after the scope of the class, as in here. The variables must be initialized before use, or garbage values are used. Okay. After scope, the variables assume the value prior to the scope. Okay, and that's the thing. Instead of throwing error, the garbage values are used, and that's about it. Okay. auto initialize to 0, auto initialize to 0 before use. Now let's look at the private clause. Now here's the thing, when you use private clause and first private clause, what happens is that if the values are modified, the values are being modified inside the parallel block, those modified values do not come out of the parallel block. Now what if I need a condition such that I want the modified value outside the parallel block?